Is the new war against humanity the tyranny of artificial intelligence? This is Inverted World Live. Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be here. I am your host, Shane Cashman. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving break. We missed you guys, but here we are. We have a good episode loaded up for y'all. Thank you for being here. I'm joined by Alex. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Hope you had a nice time off. Everyone in my house was sick with pneumonia.
Oh, boy.
It's going around.
You don't have a robot babysitter to help administer?
I maybe wish I did. I'm
Really?
not sure. I don't know if I want to let one of those into my house.
I wouldn't let one of those in my house. I had a friend tell me he might consider a robot in the house, but it has to be bulletproof.
Oh.
Which
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? 'Cause I don't trust him. Well, I have an expert on robots here today. A good friend, a great writer. I actually wanted to read one little excerpt from his great book. Before we introduce him, let's pull it up. And this is from Dark Eon. That organization, he's talking about the Gnostics, still thrives today. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, the local OTO chapter held an infamous Gnostic Mass every Sunday, where they served a communion of wine with a cake of light, containing, and this is in quotes, either food-grade animal blood or human blood, typically from the priestess, end quote. Non-alcoholic and gluten-free options were also available. I love that detail. For the record, my guest never attended. We have Joe Allen today. Let's bring on Joe.
Hello, how are you?
Joe, how are you, sir?
I am great.
So right before we went live, I was saying how this podcast will soon enough be fully Amish in rejection of the oncoming AI apocalypse, and it will be paper cups and strings, and we will operate that way. And you said
I've got a string and a paper cup actually right outside. It's a can. It's not a paper cup, but
good.
Same deal.
Okay.
It's going to take a while to run the line, but
the tin can is a little too technologically advanced for my liking, but we'll allow it. But you were saying that you worried that the future of the AI singularity might just be the spinning wheel forever. Do you think we should be worried about the AI? Where are you with this? Like, I don't know.
You know, I have a pretty open mind as to where the future may go. It may be as great as the boosters say, although I really, really doubt it. Nothing ever tends to end up that way. But the hellish idea of robots eventually utilizing artificial intelligence to slowly push human beings by their own will out of the way, I'm pretty skeptical of that too. I think it'll be somewhere in between. I've oftentimes said the best prediction for the future is going to be something like the Matrix, but more like Idiocracy.
Do you think we're pretty close to that?
Idiocracy, yes. The Matrix, in a metaphoric sense, yes.
Right.
You know, but that was pretty clear when the film came out back in 1999.
Yeah.
That, you know, we have lived in a kind of media saturated illusion, or a house of mirrors of many illusions, many competing illusions. And once you take the proverbial red pill, then you know, I guess you're faced with the dark reality that most people are completely consumed by the narratives that they absorb, and you're not really going to get too far into their worlds without accommodating those illusions. Now, it raises the question: what about you and me?
Right.
Are we also deluded by the Matrix? And I would say probably, yeah, a lot more than we would want to admit. But yeah, I think that the biggest fear that anyone should have about artificial intelligence is not unlike the pop music revolution post Napster in the early 2000s, or maybe the rise of the self-service kiosk in retail stores. Basically, the biggest worry I have about the future of AI is it's going to make the future irritating. It's going to make everything suck.
Right. It's like right now when you have to make these phone calls to certain institutions and you talk to like the robot, you know, I feel like it's going to be that on steroids everywhere you go. And I think, do you think people are going to accept that annoyance? Like 'cause when I have this argument with people who are very pro AI, they love it. They make their art with it. They use it for work. They say it's inevitable and you just have to embrace it. Do you think that's like where we're going?
Look, I think that it's going to be very, very different in different societies and different subcultures within each society. I don't think you're going to see the Amish turning their labor force over to robots, right? And just kick back and, I don't know, chew on straw or whatever it is that there's left to do if they got robots doing their barn raisings. But so I think that different subcultures are going to accept it at different levels. And you know, some people absolutely, you know, kind of emanating out of the Silicon Valleys and the more tech obsessive, tech fetishistic sort of cultures. Yeah, they already are.
Yeah.
They already believe they're speaking to gods, little g gods.
Right.
Or at least the infants that will eventually grow into little g gods. But then, and you know, you see it in all sorts of different companies. They're already deploying AI all throughout their organizations. You see it in schools. You see it in social media, on and on and on. But I think there are going to be a lot of people that reject it as much as they possibly can. And there's going to be a lot of people in between. But I look forward to the future, although I think that you're going to have your force field up at all times, especially as things get weirder and weirder. As these video generators and text generators really do become more responsive and autonomous, as they become more and more agent-like, it's going to be very, very difficult to tell what is and isn't human produced online, and maybe even in physical artifacts. And if you are super pro-human, you're going to have to put some effort into it, but that's fine. We have to be ready for that, and we just have to accept that, because I don't see it going away. You know, there was maybe some hope years ago that a conservative establishment would be averse to all this, but you know, that illusion was dispelled at least a year and a half, 2 years ago. I pretty much got the signal that everyone from the kind of top operatives at the in the Republican Party to Fox News to the Wall Street Journal to many Christian organizations, on and on and on, the sorts of people who would normally be averse to mass radical transformation, they're maybe on board with it more than the left at this point because it's fashionable. So they're gonna usher it in. It's gonna happen.
I think it's happening.
Whether it's gonna be like the cartoonish images of singularities and post-human beings and nanobot swarms, you know, I wouldn't necessarily anticipate the most extreme fantasies to become real in a literal sense, but we're going to see some approximation of it. Again, we already do.
I think the right and the Christian right's embracing of Elon is that signal, you know, because he's going to usher in, you know, and you can champion all the good you think he might do. I do enjoy Twitter. I use it too much. But they're embracing what will become and what could become an AI government, you know, plus the acceleration of the surveillance state, which he partakes in. He's a defense contractor, and no one seems to be talking about that. You know, it's weird to me.
I mean, to me, you know, I've never really been one to hit at Elon Musk on a personal level or anyone. Occasionally I will, but I don't think that's very fruitful. The real problem with the Elon Musks of the world is that they share certain values in common that I find to be completely abhorrent. So
like what?
You look at Musk's portfolio, you know, most of the active satellites floating around just beyond the atmosphere are Starlink. They're comms, obviously, but also comms for spy agencies, for military organizations. And I think that there's every reason to believe that that level of control is going to be leveraged so hard, he may actually become a kind of Red Caesar, as many people dream of him being. But moving down from there, you know, he's working on Colossus just down the road from me in Memphis. And I think right now it's I get conflicting stories, but it's at least 100,000 GPUs, should be 200,000 in the near future. He's, as always, pushing out, this idea of what the future will be, 1 million GPUs in the near future. And he's going to use that to train Grok, Tesla AI, I'm sure. And what we're going to find out with that, as this AI arms race just accelerates, is whether or not scaling is the key to more and more complex and unpredictable artificial intelligence. And of course, Meta, OpenAI, all of these other companies are racing to keep up. And so it's going to be a weirder and weirder world, and conservatives are in a position to both channel it to some extent, benefit from it. But what I see is that conservatives are basically they're being led along with these very simplistic dreams of a future that benefits them, when in fact it's just going to become more and more inhuman.
Oh yeah.
And the center of gravity will move more and more to the machine. Go on down from there. Optimus robots, Tesla Bugman mobiles, whatever sorts of biological sorts of projects that he may end up working on, sort of like what he did with CureVac back in 2020. Yeah, it's a worldview that I find repulsive.
Yeah.
He may be funny, he may be cool, but I am not one to cheer on the dream of hundreds of millions or billions of people with a Neuralink trode in their head. That's
right.
That's insane.
And I get when I had the Neuralink conversation, the short-term benefits of what he's selling now. It's beautiful to think you can give someone hearing back. You could stop seizures. You could make someone walk again. It's hard to argue against it, but it's the things in the future where that will become a necessary part of life. I think if you want to partake in whatever modern life looks like in the maybe not so distant future, you might have one. And it's funny to me that a lot of the people who say they might be against transgenderism are now perhaps will embrace transhumanism by wanting the Neuralink and altering their body to be part of this dystopia.
Yeah, it's there's an obvious connection between transgenderism and transhumanism. I talk about this a lot. People like Martine Rothblatt make it very clear. Books like Virtually Human and From Transgender to Transhuman. But transhumanism is much, much broader than transgenderism. And you have, for instance, the enhanced Olympics that Peter Thiel is boosting. And that is basically a gender normative kind of version of human enhancement, transhumanism, that doesn't really involve cutting off something and replacing it with a Mr. Potato Head part. It's more, giving Mr. Potato Head bigger and bigger parts.
Right.
And Mrs. Potato Head.
Well,
I think that it's really a good illustration of what you can expect from the future, because you have here Elon Musk talking about these godlike super intelligences that must be combated with more human-centered AIs, and that the way that we're going to combat them is to link our brains to a tertiary AI self that's been trained on our morals and values and ourselves.
Yep.
And we'll link our brains with freaking trodes in our gray matter, blah, 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 cyborg heroes against the post-human swarm. And yeah, okay, I'm sure something to that extent is on down the road, kind of. But if you look at transgenderism, and this is very old. It's over a century old, right? And whenever people are like, they're 50 years ahead of anything you see today, I'm like, well, okay, let's check in on the transgender movement. They've been talking for a century about turning men into women and women into men. But last I checked, on occasion you find one that would pass on film or maybe in a club, but they have not successfully done any of that. What they've done is they've created technological illusions by kind of grafting body parts and things like that. But, ultimately, the only thing they've really accomplished is to get people to accept it and to get people to change their language and to call a man a woman and a woman a man.
Yeah.
It'll probably be very similar with these godlike AIs. The AI is good enough that you can have a conversation with it, and maybe it really will be a kind of PhD level polymath, as they're kind of hinting at for 2025, 2026 with GPT-5, maybe Grok 3, who knows? Okay, but the kind of godlike expectation is what's really important. You know, I can have a little totem for you and shake it around with rattles in front of your face and say, this is magic, this is God. And, maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. Throughout human history, people have believed it a lot.
Right.
Now I have a totem that will talk on its own without me having to talk for it. So, yeah, I think it's really important to distinguish that, though. Just because things are going to change doesn't mean it's going to completely align with the vision that it's changing towards. But it doesn't, you can't discount it. But to take it literally, to me, is a fool's errand.
Yeah. So like I was saying before we went live about a lot of friends leaving New York, and a lot of friends left New York because of how it became a really scary, deranged surveillance state during lockdowns. And they were trying to pass, I think they were using the codes, right, to get into restaurants for the vaccine passport stuff. And then you brought up Peter Thiel, and that's someone, in my opinion, who's expanding all of that, which could become the social credit system. And then also speaking of becoming gods, he's known for injecting the blood of younger people into his body with the company Ambrosia. Have you heard of Ambrosia?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah, it's
crazy. He showed interest in it. Whether he's actually done it, don't know. But Brian Johnson, Brian, Alucard Johnson, he's
right.
taken his own son's blood, or at least part of the blood, and donated it to his own father. So it's a strange family tradition, and one that as you see. Look, I love Tucker, but as you see Tucker Carlson boosting people like Brian Johnson, it's not that he didn't question it, but let's just say that it wasn't the most challenging interview ever. I think that there is every reason to believe that we'll see a kind of Trump-era transhuman revolution that far exceeds anything that happened under Biden. So, that's just something people are going to have to just prepare for. I don't think the government can do certain things. They can outlaw parabiosis, right? The blood transfusion process, where they could outlaw AI. They could, but they're not going to, most likely. And even if they do, many societies won't. So I just think it's just really important to remember that basically this technological antichrist has been rising for centuries and will continue to rise. And you just have to be able to look that beast in his beady black eye, like I'm doing right now, and try to laugh.
You gotta try to laugh.
It's gonna be just uglier and uglier.
And then for those wondering, if you don't know, ambrosia is the Greek food of the gods for immortality, I believe. So this is the kind of game they're playing, and they're also, Peter Thiel and Musk, with the defense contracts for spy satellites, are building an omniscient false god in the sky, or with things like their AI, or Clearview AI, which scoured the internet of all of our photos to put into their database for facial recognition, which I'm curious about because it seems so widespread, and they have like billions of photos that they've scraped off the internet. And I'm wondering how, if they are, I'm sure they are, applying that to what's going on with the recent assassination of the United Health CEO, who just seems to have vanished, right? In a surveillance state like New York, where cameras are everywhere. I'm curious, if how much AI is being used to try to trap this guy.
I mean, I can't imagine a world in which it's not being used as much as possible, but there's so many weird things about that assassination. The more I've looked at it, especially, over the weekend, people have noted pretty much immediately, right? The online swarms noted that you've got those Crime Stoppers photos that they put out, and one shows the shooter at the scene of the crime, and he's got a kind of dark jacket on with a hood, and the backpack is obviously like a whitish or silverish color. And then you've got the other picture that they put out where he's flirting with the girl and has pulled his mask down, or her mask down. Who knows?
But never be too sure.
One way or the other, the backpack is black, right? So, and the hoodie is very different. And so nobody's really talking about that discrepancy in the media. It's all like this churn online. And the one article that I've read, there's probably others, but the one I read was from Newsweek, and they get this security expert to explain what's going on with these two different backpacks. He's like, oh yeah, well, most likely he had a change of clothes and another backpack in the one backpack, so that when he went into Central Park, he could change and escape. And they're like, well, that doesn't say anything about what we're talking about, which is that the day before, he was in a hostel with a black backpack
Right.
and a lighter jacket. Then later you see him with a silver one and a darker jacket. And it really doesn't make any sense. Like, even like, why would you even say that? Like, the guy's going to have like an almost identical outfit in his backpack and throw that bad boy on. It doesn't make any sense. So what I see is like, it's either, you know, I usually attribute these sorts of things to just stupidity. But this is so in your face, along with all of this kind of swarm activity push, like celebrating the CEO's death, that I for once, well, maybe not for once, but I think it's probably a good time to unleash the paranoid, shadow of the mind and start wondering if we're not just simply being toyed with by either intelligence agencies or someone else in regard to all this.
I agree. I think he's out there smiling on camera, knowing very well what's going to happen afterwards. If he's that calculated, I believe he was that calculated, and knowing in that surveillance state, everything he does will be looked at, and then it's used, as like almost like a red herring. I don't know, because he could just be a guy who's getting away with it for now, But it's funny because it's not funny. But AI fits into that story at all. I was curious if you knew anything about the AI and United Health connection and the health insurance company using some AI to basically deny people. It had like a 90% error rate. So it's almost like this. If it is a personal assassination, not some hired killing, and about people are saying, because you had the words written on the shell casings that made it sound like it was about, deny and all this stuff. I forget the 3 words. But like, if that is the case, it's almost like a backlash against the AI technocracy that's happening behind the curtain with all these insurance companies.
Yeah, so just real quick before I go there, just to say, if this guy has any kind of online footprint or lady or whatever, then a software like Clearview AI, which has been trained on basically every face on the internet, with some missing, I'm sure, then it shouldn't really be that difficult to, match that with some identity online,
right?
And use various other tools to find him, or her, whatever, or they, whatever. But so yeah, it would be very, very surprising, again, unless this person has just lived in the dark, just never touched, never been online, for them not to have a pretty good idea who this person is. But there's no way to know until we have somebody in custody or some manifesto or whatever exactly what the motive was. The writing on the shell casings or on the bullets, was it deny, defend, and depose, or maybe it was deny, delay, depose.
Yeah.
It kind of matches a book that was published in 2010 with a similar title about how insurance companies screw you over. So it's pretty clear the message that was being sent. But yeah, United Health or United Healthcare was embroiled for the last year, a little over a year, in a lawsuit in which they were being sued on the grounds that their AI was denying coverage, without any real human oversight. There's this human oversight. It's the wrong way of putting it. There's human oversight, but the humans who are working at the subsidiary, it's called Navi Health, and working with this AI called NH Predict, that they were instructed to remain within a margin of 1% to 3%. I've seen both reported as to what the AI is recommending. So you had these 2 kind of high-profile lawsuits by these 2 families whose loved ones had been denied coverage and the loved ones died. So that narrative was out there for the last year. And, I don't know how accurate this statistic is. I saw it just on, kind of mainstream outlet, but United Healthcare, their average was around 30% denial, and the industry average is about 16%, meaning that, without a doubt, AI is being used to streamline and make it efficient, and therefore booting people out of the system. And it seems to exceed the industry standard. And then the 90%, so the 90% inaccuracy is not exactly an accurate, statistic. Basically, the way they derived that, they did a study of recent lawsuits in which people had come forward accusing insurance companies of using AI to boot somebody off of the program. And in 90% of the cases, the courts had ruled in favor of the plaintiff, meaning that 90% of the cases, the courts said that the AI was inaccurate in those cases. So
Okay.
it's not, who knows how accurate or inaccurate it is, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I do think that even though I think this whole push of romanticizing this guy's killing, the CEO's killing, and it's profoundly unhealthy and potentially dangerous, and the copycat effect is not going to be isolated to bad guys. The copycat effect, if it does spark off, could be anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Any high-profile target. Some lunatic's like, oh, this is cool. This is what I'm going to do. So, but but that being said, it's also clear that these insurance companies are a prime example of what happens when you have a system that's already pretty anti-human, in which a corporation is basically functioning like a machine, a parasite, a massive parasite. And the AI element just makes it that much worse.
Yep.
It just detaches it from the human that much more. And it kind of reveals this dark robotic face that's at once malevolent and retarded.
Yep.
Kind of like a demiurge, you might say.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then going back to the government and this administration we have moving in now, Elon, Teal, Teal, Vance, all these people.
And Dreesen.
Right. And I worry. So I like the idea. I love the idea of stripping down that government. We need it. My fear is that they're going to replace that with the AI government. And that bothers me. And then on top of that, we've already seen in the last year, the Pentagon, I believe, giving AI license to kill, right? Which is, I think, what's happening with AI Lavender in Gaza. Is that not right?
As of right now, the Pentagon's stated policy, there's that again. There's the thing that's said and there's the thing that is. But the stated policy is to keep a human in the loop with any autonomous weapons.
Okay.
To
what degree?
In Ukraine, and the AI is provided, or one of the many providers of AI, weaponized AI systems, is Palantir.
Yeah.
They've bragged about that for 2 years now, that they donated it and that they're using it as a kind of laboratory for lethal AI and weaponry, right? And so in Ukraine, you have reports that, so we know for sure that the drones being used in Ukraine, at least some of them, can operate fully autonomously. And the idea is that if the communication gets jammed up, if it gets sabotaged, then the drone can complete the kill operation without a human in the loop. So we know that's happening. And how many times that happens without a human really even being there, where they just send a drone off, say, kill this type of person, or kill, attack this kind of vehicle. Who knows?
Right.
But we know that the potential's there and the will is there, and at least sometimes that's happening. In the case of Israel, you've got Lavender, which I tend to confuse these, but so maybe I switch this around if I'm inaccurate.
No, it's Lavender.
You've got Lavender, which basically tracks a target, and then you've got Hapsora, translates as the gospel, which identifies what a valid target is. So in both of these AI systems are being deployed on the Gazans, and they are also notoriously inaccurate. And you have reports from at least some soldiers who are unhappy about this, Israeli soldiers who are unhappy about this, saying they're pressured to accept the output of the AI as valid and killing people at this massive scale and this massive speed. And they're not really even sure if it's a valid target. So it's, already the horror has begun. And you've got Eric Schmidt, who has long argued, Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, who has long argued that that we will have to keep up with China and Russia and so on and so forth with our lethal autonomous weaponry up to the point of just turning it over to the AI. So the AI is making decisions not only about what is and isn't a valid target, but how to, the path to get to it, whether the attack is launched, all these sorts of things. Like off in the future, he kind of sees this as being the leading edge of warfare. So it'll just be robots versus robots, or at least robots killing humans without humans having much to do with it.
Yeah.
So Schmidt is now, he's now a licensed arms dealer. His company White Stork is producing drones for Ukraine. You also have Palantir now. Anduril, which, that's Palmer Luckey, Peter Thiel protege, and in association with Palantir. And they are really ramping up efforts to create all sorts of different kind of AI-based and virtual reality-based weaponry, and now partnering with OpenAI. So I guess what I'm saying in general, just to this point, is that it's not just going to be producing weird psychedelic videos or saying weird things online. It's not, AI is not just going to be used to boot you off of your insurance program. AI is already being used in the process of killing human beings and will increasingly be used to kill human beings. And I don't see anybody trying to put on the brakes.
Yeah. Can you describe what Palantir does?
Well, they were formed just after 9/11, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and others. And so they have a lot of different AIs, right? They have a lot of different programs, but one of the ones that I did pay a bit of attention to that really took my interest. I mean, by and large, it's surveillance, right? So they're raking over communications or, government databases or, classified intel, whatever, to identify potential threats, national security threats. And, in the wake of 9/11, that makes a lot of sense. They have programs that are geared towards verifying or monitoring illegal immigration, right? So in a way that's a positive, but ultimately if it's, if that same sort of system's turned on us, it really isn't. So, but they had this program Meta Constellation that they were talking, that Alex Karp was talking a lot about at the, I believe, 2022 or maybe 23 January World Economic Forum. I think it's 23 January World Economic Forum. And it is doing exactly that in Ukraine and elsewhere. Basically, it's a program for target acquisition to locate the threat itself, to identify a threat. And, again, looking at comms, looking at satellite data, all this sorts of stuff. There are humans doing it too. It's not just like some kind of, robot or some brain inside a server
Not yet.
doing this.
Yeah.
But it enhances the human desire to kill.
Right.
And so yeah, Palantir, again, they have their hands in a lot of different pies, everything from national security to immigration to the conducting warfare itself. But basically, Peter Thiel, whom I think is an interesting person. You read his writing, he's not boring. And in many ways, the way he thinks is the way I think, except for this whole idea that the answer to a nightmarish acceleration, kind of rise of an Armageddon-like scenario, is to just simply build bigger and more effective machines.
Right. That's the problem is, unlike Bill Gates, I do find these guys fascinating. I do like listening to them. I think they're very interesting people, but they're building a dystopia. But they say they're building a utopia. When it comes to the surveillance state stuff, that's very bothersome. And then the stuff that you're talking about in Israel or the Palantir, is that what's going to usher in, maybe it's already here, like the programmatic policing?
It very well could be. I mean, so again, there's a lot of crossover. You see the militarization of police all over the world. So there's a lot of crossover there. And the police, of course, have all sorts of AI systems at their disposal to rake over their surveillance systems and all that. So conservatives might feel really comfortable right now as this is being built, because at least we have the appearance that this is going to be used to help us and hurt our enemies, whether political enemies at home or geopolitical rivals. But, this has been pointed out again for decades and decades and decades. When you build these systems that are hostile to human beings, it's only a matter of time before either A, your opponent takes over that system, or B, your ally becomes your opponent and is in control of that system, or C, some rival outside of that, say China or some other geopolitical rival, develops it and develops something like that on the backbone of what the U.S. has done. It's not like people talk about China, like we got to keep up with China. China is struggling to keep up with us. We've led this the entire time, and we're going to keep leading it. So, I get it. If we stop, then they may catch up. They may surpass us. It's really catch-22. That's why I say, nothing is inevitable. You could have tomorrow suddenly this mass awakening in the human species in which most people, including people in power, are like, oh my God, we're creating this nightmare technological world. We have to stop, and it'll be multilateral. We'll all decide, that this is it. And we're just going to, retreat. We're going to reconstitute the ancient traditional way and, follow the lead of our ascetic priests, and our warriors will only attack when necessary,
Right.
if ever. And we'll have happy people and happy servants, and everything will be like, the Mahabharata, only better. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
What I see happening is as good as inevitable. Basically, what you have is this arms race that if you check out of it, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Because this is the system they're setting up. They're setting up a digital ecosystem. So they talk about it like it's like nature doing this, like ecosystem is evolution, man. You got to adapt. Yeah. You have to adapt to a system they've created, an artificial system that they made themselves. So, I just to tie this off, because I feel that I've gone on a bit long.
No, this is good.
Which I want to do. I really do think that one of the problems that I have with the talk about AI, as if it's its own entity, as if it's this thing. It is, in a way. You could see it that way, and in some sense, perhaps on a spiritual level, it is in fact its own kind of entity or swarm of entities entering into our material reality from some other Lovecraftian sort of dimension. But one way or the other, the people summoning it, the people in control of it right now, the people pushing it right now are people.
Right.
And so those people need to have the fingers pointed at them. You can't just point to the AI and be like, the AI is doing this and the dangers of AI. No, it's the dangers of Sam Altman's AI.
Right.
It's the dangers of Elon Musk's AI.
Yeah.
That's the danger. And you have to keep the finger pointed at the human beings doing it, even if they are like some kind of like, New Orleanian voodoo priesthood that's summoning the Cthulhu from beyond. They're doing it. The Cthulhu may be the enemy, but so is the priesthood.
And the way you're talking about the AI world and people maybe opting out, that's like on a macro level of the world. But then to connect that to what I'm saying about Neuralink stuff, that's on the micro level, humans not being able to opt out in the future, right? Because it's just like you're going to be left behind. I hope people have that change of heart, but I don't know. But all that, what you just said, seems like a good segue into how I opened the show with Gnosticism. And I'm hoping you could describe that for us and then talk about how Gnosticism ties into what we've been talking about.
Well, first and foremost, Gnosticism is an ancient kind of offshoot of Christianity, in many ways preceded Christianity and adapted itself to it. It's a heresy. It's considered a heresy by most, obviously the Orthodox and Catholics and most Protestants. It's also the subject of a lot of really stupid commentary from certain quarters about Gnosticism is really Marxism, Gnosticism, all that, We'll just set that aside, leave that alone. But Gnosticism itself is, I think, quite interesting for a lot of different reasons. Not least because of its sudden reemergence in 1945 with the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library, the Gnostic Gospels in essence. Gnosticism had been known from the heresiologists or the church apologists. So we had forever we've had some idea of who these people were, but with the discovery of their actual documents, you get a much clearer picture of the world as they saw it. Mm-hmm. And that world is by and large, building on the Orthodox Christian understanding. So in Orthodox Christian creation, God creates the world by speaking it into existence. And he does so at different levels, right? Beginning with the stars, the sun, moon, and then moving down to earth and life. And in, Orthodox Christianity, you have the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, the temptation of the serpent, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then, of course, in the New Testament, you have the introduction of Jesus, and now that's the centerpiece of it. That's what makes it all make sense. Mm-hmm. Well, Gnostics basically accept that framework, but they build around it, or they would say they reveal the world behind that. And so, according to the Gnostic point of view, the fall wasn't the fault of Adam and Eve. And the fall really goes back to, in the beginning, according to the Gnostics, you had this light, this fullness, the pleroma. And it begins to emanate, sort of like the Platonic or Neoplatonic ideas of Plotinus, not entirely, but so it emanates into these aeons, hence dark aeon, right? Emanates into these aeons. And these aeons are male-female pairs. And they, they're less and less perfect as this emanation proceeds. And at the furthest emanation, you have one of those syzygies or male-female pairs. You have Sophia, the female side. And without the knowledge or consent of her male partner, Sophia turns into what they call the outer darkness. And in one account, sees the reflection of the light out in the material of the outer darkness and is lured away. And out in the outer darkness, Sophia she produces an infant, a child. And it's described in the Gnostic scriptures as being like an aborted fetus, like an aborted infant. And she brings it to life. She breathes life into it of sorts. But it's this deformed, blind or half-blind entity that she's ashamed of. And this entity, known by a number of different names, we'll just call it the demiurge. It's known as Yaldabaoth, Samael, but this entity, this aborted fetus outside the divine realm, believes, and it's said over and over again in the Gnostic scripture, believes that he is the only God. He believes that he is alone in this vast darkness, and that moving forward, he begins to create a world, not knowing that he is inspired by the divine plan above him and that's imbued in him. He begins to create this world, and that's the beginning of Genesis.
Right.
And so this idea, again, a lot of this is poetic. It's mythology, self-conscious mythology that's not to be necessarily taken literally, but it's this idea that, not unlike in the later ideas of the Matrix, that this world is imperfect, not because human beings brought sin into the world, but because there was something in the divine hierarchy that allowed for a flaw. And so that the world is inherently flawed. That's the beginnings of what they would call gnosis, or knowledge, the secret knowledge. And there are different approaches within even the Gnostic scriptures and what we know of the Gnostic sects as to what to do about it. But the primary approach is to take that gnosis and to escape this flawed material world into a perfected spiritual world. It's not that dissimilar from a lot of Christian thinking. Like, Christians pulled a lot of this out of Greece, out of the ancient Greeks. This idea of a soul that's spiritual and a body that's flawed, and the soul goes into the heavens. Plato talks about this, right? But the Gnostics have a Christian slant, so that Jesus did come to bring salvation according to their narrative. And the salvation is against this world, right? Paul talks about the powers and principalities of this world, and Jesus oftentimes talks about the temptations of the material, right? Don't bury your treasure on earth, but in heaven. So you have that dualism already there, but the Gnostics just take it to an extreme, and they cast doubt not only on the physical world and the ability of the physical world to satisfy or to save, but they cast doubt on the structure of the church and the authority of the church. And so, like many others who have challenged that authority, they got disappeared. And they reemerge in 1945 with these scriptures. I go into all this in the book, in Dark Aeon. But it's fascinating to me. I myself am not a Gnostic, but I'm quite close to a lot of the modern day Gnosticism. I've spent a lot of time studying it. And that reemergence in 1945, you've got the A-bomb blast, boom, right? And out in the desert in America, and then the A-bomb deployed on human populations in Nagasaki, Hiroshima, boom, boom, this dramatic transformation of what it means to be human on Earth. And then just incidentally, you have the creation of the first digital computer, which is intended to model future A-bomb blasts, especially the thermonuclear hydrogen bomb.
Right.
And then in December, you have the discovery of the Gnostic texts in the desert outside of Cairo, near the village of Nag Hammadi. And suddenly the central figure of Western civilization, Jesus Christ, now you have this this new perspective on what at least some early Christians believed he was and what he was here to do. Then, as if it wouldn't, it couldn't get weirder, you have the discovery the very next year, 1946, of the Dead Sea Scrolls outside of the Dead Sea in the Levant.
Yep.
And again, it's different, very different from the Gnostic text, but again, it gives you some insight onto what was going on around Jesus and who he may have been. And then you get the introduction of UFOs around the same time. And Carl Jung had a lot to say about all this. I do as well, not as well as him, but also. But yeah, so the Gnostics, I think, are really important for a lot of reasons. And I think that this current push to to get rid of the heresy of Gnosticism, fine, I respect Orthodox Christians and their desire to do that, but most of them aren't taking the time to really understand what it is they're fighting against. It's just another boogeyman. I think that it's really important to look at, because if you look around the culture of the West, and especially America, a lot of the Gnostic presuppositions are baked into the American project. Maybe not as extreme as somebody like Harold Bloom would say, but if you're going to do away with all of these heresies, you're basically going to have to begin with the foundation of America. And I'm not sure where it goes from there. Not a place I would want to go. So,
how do you see it? How do you see it baked into the culture? Like, where do you see it?
Well, so this isn't my observation, but the most extreme argument was made by Harold Bloom, the scholar who spent much of his time on Gnosticism. The idea that America could break free of the traditional constraints of Europe and break free of the dominion of, Orthodox religion, Catholicism in particular, and create something wholly new, and create something that is willful, like the object of the Constitution in a constitutional republic being an act of human will, basically against everything that came before, or at least radically altering everything that came before. Now, his is an extreme example, but it's taken up also by Stephen Heller, the aged bishop of the Ecclesia Gnostica, the one of the most prominent kind of Gnostic revival churches. He's very pro-American, came from Hungary, where he experienced the horrors of Nazism and communism, and sees America as this great project that is essentially Gnostic, along with Harold Bloom. And you see it all throughout the culture, this notion that all is an illusion. If you can break through that illusion, you take the red pill, so on and so forth, you can arrive at reality. Some people try to associate it with, again, like communism. It doesn't, it kind of, but that's a much flimsier connection. It requires a much more shallow analysis. Transgenderism, even more so.
Right.
But transhumanism, I'll end it on that. Transhumanism does have a Gnostic element to it. At least certain branches of transhumanism. There's no there's no one transhumanism. There's just all these different kinds of transhumanism, these different strains. But at least in some of them, is described, say, for instance, by Zoltan Istvan, the one-time Transhumanist Party presidential candidate in 2016. He really kind of lays it bare, talking about the desire of leaving the flesh behind completely and uploading one's soul into this digital realm, right? Very much mirrors the Gnostic ideal of overcoming this flawed universe and entering into something that's perfect.
Right.
But we're close to perfect. But I see it as a direct opposite in the sense that the Gnostics see a subtle realm of the fullness, the pleroma, the aeons, as this kind of crystalline, perfect place that preceded the universe and is still there, the unknown Father beyond the faces of God that we call gods. And so the base reality is this perfection, the spiritual perfection in the heavens. Whereas in the case of this the kind of Gnostic transhumanism, if you want to call it that, it's the direct opposite. It sees mostly, not all, just mostly, it sees the material as the base reality, and life evolving from that, and technology evolving from that. And so then we create a pleroma, or a bunch of different pleromas. And it's a big difference to have, ones and zeros bouncing through data centers with humans attached to it, as opposed to having this sort of emanation of the divine that the Gnostics saw. And it is, rather than escaping the material, it's just drilling deeper and deeper into the material.
Right. They're
in
building
my own view of this, I mean, I see the creation of all these technologies, and it's always being presented as salvific, right? AI gods that know all, that can tell you the secrets of the universe, or at least the secrets of your own life and mind. These divine connections, this communion of brain chips or less dramatic connections, the perfection of humanity, the healing of humanity through genetic engineering or whatever sort of radical intervention. All of this has its antecedent in religious dreams of healing and greater knowledge and wisdom and salvation. But it's this bastardized or flawed material form. And so what I see ultimately, if I can have a quick 2-sentence confession, is that it's as if humanity is its own little demiurge, and working from like this innate knowledge of the divine forms, we're creating mirrors of the divine that are extraordinarily flawed. And the atheistic transhumanist, like the demiurge of the Gnostic tales, we believe we're the only ones. We believe there's no God above us. And so we're basically putting the human imprint into the digital and into the technological. But some see it as beautiful. They think that this is the ideal. This is what we should go for. I see it as a monstrosity, but again, one that hopefully we can have fun in the shadow of.
Well, that's what Ray Kurzweil talks about, uploading your consciousness into this, kind of like what you're saying, a fake heaven. And I think it's in your book where you say Gnosticism is an inversion of Christianity, and then this Gnostic transhumanism is an inversion, like you're saying, of Gnosticism, because, well, I guess the one early and biggest difference between the Christians and the Gnostics, if I'm reading correctly or listening correctly, is that they believe that the God that created this world is imperfect. The world is imperfect, but Christianity, perfect God with an imperfect creation after the fall of man. Meanwhile, fast forward to this false heaven that, not false heaven for the Gnostics. They would believe they can ascend to this better place, but then the Gnostic transhumanists are building their little machine heavens, and it can be personalized, and you can upload it, and that is shackled to the material world that they want. And so back to Ray Kurzweil, he's one of the first people I ever heard talk about, being able to upload your consciousness into a computer and live forever. If you even consider that living, I think we're like, how do you think we'll define what it means to be a human in 50 years? Do you think we're just going to have a cultural redefinition of humanity at some point?
We already have.
Yeah.
Probably the most radical redefinition of humanity was the hard scientific worldview that excludes religious perspectives.
Right.
A lot of science, a lot of religious people just take the facts of science and use that to grow their own religious worldview. But obviously, atheism in many, if not most, elite circles has won the day, and more so in the populace. And so now, instead of having a created humanity in the image of God, or emanated humanity in the case of the Neoplatonists, or also a kind of emanated humanity in the Hindus, or whatever, just pick a religious system. Instead, we're just naked we're naked apes.
Right.
And that is a radical redefinition of what a human being is, just this material organism with a big brain and the ability to create tools.
Yep.
And when that is completely severed from religion, which in many cultures and most elite cultures it seems to have been severed, then from there it's just transhumanism is just kind of an elaboration on it. But again, there's so many different forms of transhumanism. I don't mean to say all transhumanists believe this, but I do mean to say for sure that it is a prominent thread. Kurzweil being one, many others, and so now finding ourselves in this, just take the atheistic transhuman point of view, finding ourselves as naked apes who organize like ants and are creating these technological systems. We are now at a place in their point of view where we can begin to create what religions have said have always existed. We will now create a God that never existed. We will create heavens that never were. And we'll use our technology to either create a God that we will kneel down to, or in the more hubristic sorts of ideas like Max Moore, that we will make ourselves gods.
Right. I mean, there's a reason Apple has an apple with a bite out of it, right?
Yeah, you know, there's an interesting story. When I was in Prague in 2015, it must have been, or 14, I went to the Apple Museum there, and on the front glass there was a decal that said, "Three apples changed the world. The first was handed to Adam by Eve. The second landed on Newton's head, and the
Wow.
third was handed half-eaten to the world by Steve Jobs."
There you go. Wow. Yeah, well, that makes sense. And there's no going back. There's no going back. It's just a constant falling for man with all this stuff. But it's hard because I love technology. As much as I joke about being a Luddite, here we are talking from different states over microphones and a computer. So as much as I joke about rejecting it all, I love it. But I do worry about the future my kids are going to inherit, where they're going to face Neuralink popularity. The AI, I mean, right now, if I opt out of AI, like I don't use it, I don't use Grok, I never use it, but I think I know we're all participating in it on Twitter at least, because, and on Google, everywhere, because it's eating us, right? It's eating everything we do, putting it into its database and then spitting it out for some, who knows where, that some idea you had is now in part of a bigger conglomerate that someone used to make a picture of Donald Trump or something. So it's like it's impossible to escape even when you think you're not participating.
Man, it's from that perspective, in the sense that it ain't going away, it's only becoming more intrusive. It's pretty grim. But ultimately, I mean, I always try to keep it in perspective that there have been so many different periods in which humans have faced horrific scenarios.
Totally.
The Huns, the Black Plague, so on and so forth. Just World War I and II, on and on and on. Like, if the atheists are correct, then it doesn't really matter, because we're just going to blink out. So it doesn't matter. It's all as if it was nothing.
Right.
I don't believe the atheists are correct, though.
Yeah, me neither.
I believe there's much more to humanity than anything that technology can improve. It really, the deepest core, can even affect. And so if we have faith in God, whatever form it is it takes in one's mind, and if we do believe in a soul that persists and is above and beyond everything here in the material, then ultimately, no matter how weird and uncomfortable or even violent and nightmarish it gets, in the end, that's the ground of being that we're standing on. And so it's easy to say right now, it's pretty comfortable here. Everything's pretty all right. But I think that has to be the attitude that religious people take, anyone with any spiritual impulse at all. And if you don't have a spiritual impulse, if you believe that all of this is just atoms in the void and it's all just dirt, we're just rad dirt, well, then ultimately none of this matters anyway. Anything could happen. It wouldn't matter, because as soon as you die, it's as if nothing happened. And once the universe cools down or recollapses, it will be as if absolutely none of it happened. So, either way, I'm very hopeful.
That's beautiful. I love that. We have a little bit of time left, and I really wanted to hear your thoughts, as I know you mentioned it to me the other day. What you've been thinking about with Aleister Crowley lately?
It's not lately so much, but I touch on it in the book, and it's something that I've actually been going back into just a little bit. Here's the thing about Aleister Crowley that I think is really interesting. There's a great video series called, I think it's called Hell's Bells. God, I should have it right on the tip of my tongue, but it was done by these like fundamentalist Christians, and it kind of has that corny fundamentalist Christian feel. But I've never seen anything more brilliant in regard to Crowley.
Okay.
Basically, they just go through all of the pop culture up to that point, and from Madonna to Marilyn Manson to AC/DC, whatever. Yep. And they show how the ethos of Aleister Crowley, this idea of the age of the child, is completely suffused into the culture of rock and roll. And if for anyone who may not be familiar with Crowley or Crowley, I never can.
Me neither. I go back and forth.
But you're talking about a black magician of the late 1800s, early 1900s, very famous, very much looked to by rock stars as an inspiration. Jimmy Page is among the most famous, Marilyn Manson and Danny Carey of Tool being others. But it really, already you have just this direct link into rock and roll. And the author, Gary Lackman, in his book, Turn Off Your Mind, probably does the best job of showing the direct lineage of Aleister Crowley to the Beatles and then Charles Manson. But this idea that Crowley had was, I believe it was 1904. If I recall correctly, he's in Egypt, and this being, Ayahuasca, comes to his wife first and then to him, and he writes automatically these 3 sections to what he called the Book of the Law. And maybe he's just bullshitting, who knows. I once stayed on a cult with a cult in Florida, and their cult leader said that Aleister Crowley was more showman than shaman. And I think that there may be something to that. But
it's a jealous cult leader.
This idea, though, I think is valid. He was, let's just say, whether it was actual mystical channeling of these forces or whether it was just really prescient art, his idea was that we're moving from the age of the father into the age of the child, the crowned and conquering child, which he identified with Horus in the Egyptian mythology. And the idea would be that the old ethic of the law, the patriarchal law, would be shattered, and that the new eon of humanity would be the age of the child, the crowned and conquering child, where love is the law, love under will. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Meaning, basically, all other standards of morals and ethics and conduct are now just going to be little man babies running around doing whatever they want. And if you look at culture for the last, really, for centuries, preceding Crowley, but especially now, it is the culture of, we are in the age of the child, the aeon of the man baby. And
they're everywhere.
I think that he is horrible. And I mean, the dude wrote poetry about eating doo-doo. You know what I mean? Like, there's things wrong with him, real bad.
Definitely things wrong with him.
He had an enormous impact. And I think that kind of mysticism, you see it in Timothy Leary, a direct reference to Crowley. At one point, he thought he was the reincarnation of Crowley. You see it suffusing the culture. It gives a dark air, a really dark air to pop culture and American culture in general.
Yeah. When that, in 1904, was that what they call like the demon that he was talking to? Or people refer to, I don't know if he referred to it as a demon, but he like drew it to, it looks like a gray alien almost, if you see sketches.
Oh, no, that was later. It was
okay.
The date escapes me, but much later. That was in New York, reportedly under the influence of mescaline.
Okay.
And he drew Lamb, which is that egg-headed gray alien, and he drew a gray alien basically before gray aliens were cool.
Right. Yeah, that was crazy, and that was in early April. And I was thinking about that this year just because whatever day that was in April when he talked to that alien or demon. This year on that day in April is when NASA launched the rockets into the sky during the solar eclipse. And people were like, oh my goodness, it's all aligning. It's chaos. And they called it the god of chaos. It was Apopos, I forgot how you say it. But that's what NASA called it. I'm like, oh geez, what are they signaling to Crowley?
There's a deep connection between occultism and the NASA and the space program in general.
Oh yeah.
And also in Russia. With the cosmist movement, which is in many ways, many transhumanists trace their spiritual foundation to the Russian cosmists. And they basically, it was a 20th century school of thought that believed that, again, humans would realize the dreams of religion in a material form. And a big part of that would be resurrecting the dead.
They definitely tried.
Already being done with AI, right? Like taking people's data and resurrecting them and creating these zombie personas. But then another huge element of cosmism, hence the term cosmist, was space exploration, and it was a deep influence on Russia's space program. And then, according to Douglas Rushkoff, just where I've read it anyway. That they met with what would become the kind of transhumanists in Silicon Valley in, I believe, the late 70s, maybe early 80s. And that really sparked off what we now see as kind of the transhuman culture coming out of Mondo 2000 and all that. So, the desire to go to space, to conquer space, There is the biblical version of it, right?
With Babel.
The Masonic version of it. But then there's also like I would say some darker threads. Jack Parsons with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, partnering with L. Ron Hubbard to create basically the Antichrist, to give birth to the Antichrist, and he blows himself up reportedly in his own laboratory. And L. Ron Hubbard goes on to found a religion that holds that we came from space.
Yep.
Space is again our destiny. So yeah, it's Shane, man, it's just gonna get weirder and weirder and weirder, and even the Amish are gonna have to notice how weird it's getting.
I know, I love it, man. I always love talking to you, Joe. I really appreciate it. We'll have to have you back on to report on the dystopia as it continues to grow. Where can people find you, find your book, and all that good stuff?
You can find my writings at joebot.xyz, JOEBOTXYZ. You can get signed copies of the book there, or go to Dark Aeon, that's AEON, darkaeon.xyz, and I have signed copies there. Go into basically most of what we've discussed up till
I gotta show it to
summer
people.
of 2023.
Here you go, right here. The link is also in the video right now for those that you should pick it up, because I think this is the conversation everyone should be having moving forward. If you're not aware of all this stuff, it's really important. So Joe, I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon, man.
Nanu.
Later, dude. Man, Joe's the best. That's wild stuff, people. I really encourage you all to check out his book. He's a great writer. He writes extremely well. So please check him out online.
Stuff.
Find the book. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say you need to chase it instead of running away from it, Shane.
No.
Don't
absolutely
leave us
not.
for
I have been kicking myself for even letting the people in this room just a few weeks ago use AI.
But using
I've
ChatGPT.
tried repressing that ever even happened, and I saged a room. No, I prayed on this room.
You gotta embrace. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
I'm out. I'm both.
But
foot
no,
out.
but you are 1 foot.
I'm 1 foot in. Yeah, this part. But
Yeah,
that
this
part.
part.
That
See?
part. No, I'm picking and choosing my evils.
No.
We have a pretty good caller.
We do have a good caller.
Let's bring on our caller.
Okay, let me just go ahead and get him.
We have someone who has experienced some cow mutilations. This has been a story that's intrigued me for quite some time, and this is a recent one that happened somewhere in Texas. So let's bring on our caller.
Hello there.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Just a second.
Can you hear us? Hello.
Okay.
Hey, can we hear? We can't really hear you.
I'm not hearing you very well.
Oh, okay. Can you hear us now? We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Sometimes it's just Shane's
Yeah,
mic.
it's getting better. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
So before the tech gremlins carry you away, can you walk us through what happened with the cow mutilation, and if you can bring up the picture?
Want me to do that now?
Yeah, while he tells us. For those watching, we have a pretty gruesome picture to show you, and for those listening, we're showing you what looks like what is a cow's face that has been cut open, exposing the muscles just below the skin, the jaw. And what our caller has told me earlier, the tongue has also been removed.
I can't even look at this.
And the cut is a rather clean cut. So caller, please walk us through what is going on with this.
Okay. Let me just go ahead and first start off about 4 weeks before this took place. I was looking over at night, about 9 o'clock at night, the field this happened in, and I noticed about 4 orbs flying. They were probably 300 to 400 yards away, and they were flying very erratically, but in formation, moving very quickly, something a drone couldn't do. I've seen orbs before, but these were pretty in my face, I guess you could say. And I was watching for maybe a minute and a half, and then a 5th one came in and joined the group. I didn't have my cell phone, so I was going to run back in and grab my cell phone. I told my wife to come on out, and she had looked out the window and saw them. But by the time I got my cell phone and went back out on the porch for 30 seconds, they're gone.
Hmm.
So I just want to preference this with that, because now going fast forward, it was about 9:30 in the morning. I was just going out checking the cattle. I saw the one laying on the side, and as I got up there, I saw what you just showed in the picture.
How long do you think the cow was there? And when you found the cow, were there animals around it? Like, sometimes you find a dead animal. You got a vulture, you got coyotes pecking away. Was any of that stuff that happening?
Well, that particular pasture had probably close to 500 head of cattle on it.
Hmm.
And the night prior, it was not dead because I checked the night prior, and I was out there in the morning, and it was laying over. As far as animals messing with it, they hadn't yet. In fact, it was kind of interesting because nothing really got on it for about 3 days. Um, but I didn't see any signs of any coyotes at all.
Hmm. So first of all, have you ever seen anything like this before? Having dealt with cattle?
Never. And I'm on a ranch. The owner of the ranch, he's got a couple places, and we're in North Texas. He runs about, I guess, a couple thousand head, and he's been doing it for over 10 years. He's never seen it.
What's your first thought when you see that cow?
Well, due to some of my experiences and stuff, when I called him about it, I said, well, maybe it was aliens. I was kind of half joking about it. I've heard about, this kind of mutilation of extraterrestrial or whatever it might have been,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really bought into it. But in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there going, "Is it possible?" I've been trying to figure out what animal could have done this, but I don't know. Did you show all the pictures of the rear end and the stomach and stuff?
I didn't pull up those yet. No, I thought those might be too much for some people. The back end is rough. Can you explain that though? Like what was going on there? Because it looked like something I couldn't really tell. I initially thought it was like a vulture, which is what vultures do. Unfortunately, this is gross, but that's what they do. They eat out the back end first when they find a corpse.
Well, the back end, nothing was being eaten out of it. It was being pushed out. And, we thought maybe it got hit by lightning, but we've had cattle hit by lightning. It never does this. And of course, it would not have done that to the head. These were incisions, especially in the belly. It had an incision. In the back end, it had one. And of course, you can see what happened to the head and what happened to the tongue.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you had vets come out and inspect the carcass?
I mean, and I can't say it didn't happen, but we got dogs on the property even. I mean, we're very rural. I just can't imagine anybody doing that.
Right. And did you say that you had vets come out to look at the cow?
No, we never really inspected the cow. We ended up moving it, but we had the photos, and there was three. We contacted 3 veterinarians that we used. We had horses and stuff too, and all of them. The first one said, "That's interesting." He said, "I've only seen that one other time in West Texas." The other 2 vets, which today showed them the photos, they actually said it's aliens.
Did he say that the other one he saw had similar incisions?
Say it again?
Did the vet say that the other cow mutilation he saw had similar incisions like this one had on its face?
Didn't ask him that. I think he might have maybe even seen something like online or something in West Texas. But the 2 vets today said they've never seen that before. They had no idea.
So, oh yeah, go on, please.
I was just going to say one more thing. When I first found it, I kind of wrote it off. I said, well, I've had other things happen that seemed a little bit crazier, but I just said, whatever. I just went on with the day, and then a couple of days later, I got to thinking, wait a minute, I saw those orbs over that same field about a month ago, and so I got online, so I googled cattle mutilation, and I Googled it, and almost the exact same picture came up, and that's when I just kind of went, whoa. I just kind of said, well, I need to look into this now.
Yeah, and what else did you see? You saw very similar pictures?
Yeah, I mean, you can get online and Google it. You'll have a couple come up, and it seems like most of them have the same tear on the face,
Yeah,
and they're not even from this area.
the tear is very clean.
Is that what you Googled? Cow mutilation or
Yeah, just put cattle mutilation.
cattle mutilation?
Yeah, because there's stories that are rather recent of cows being, I mean, mutilated isn't even the best term, because when I think of mutilation, I think of a mess. But this is very sterile. And
Like
other
Dexter,
Right.
it's like draining its
Right.
blood.
Real quick, I can't hear you hardly at all.
Interesting. Maybe I'll tell Alex to say stuff like, ask him if the cow mutilations are actually.
You want to come to my mic?
Yeah, no, it's all right. Ask if it smelled differently.
Did it smell differently? Like, did it smell dead or rotted?
You know, the only thing I can really say that I experienced when I walked up to it, I had a very eerie feeling. Yeah, I felt some kind of presence, but it could have been just what I was seeing. I was just kind of a little creeped out. Of course, I'm not bothered by that look, but I just felt something, and you know, that's the only thing I really noticed. I didn't smell it. There's a lot of smells out there. There's a bunch of cattle around and that kind of thing.
That's wild.
Did you say this happened more than once, or is it
No,
just this one time?
just the one time.
What did you see online?
Never happened ever. I've never seen it.
Hold on. What?
What did the internet say about orbs?
Oh yeah. So what did the internet say about orbs when you looked that up?
I didn't look up the orbs. I
you
just put in cattle mutilation, extraterrestrial or something like that.
Have you seen orbs in the area before, or just?
Or cattle mutilation. I'm sorry, cattle mutilation.
Have you seen orbs before besides the time you suspect it happened around the cattle mutilation?
I've seen orbs before, but not out here. I haven't.
About what?
When I was in Montana, I saw quite a few of them.
Orbs in Montana. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I've seen them in Montana. I actually have seen some down. I've seen them on Galveston Island too, but I'm not sure what you want to hear exactly.
If you've seen other things like that, UFOs or orbs.
So you've seen UFOs and orbs in Montana and in Texas, right? Are they very similar every time?
Well, for me, it started in 2000. I'm sorry for this. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Just ignore it.
They don't want us talking about it.
About 2019 through March, and March through 2020, and it's almost like these things were following me. I mean, I just saw them all the time, and I didn't know what they were, but some of them were quite large. But I have a good video of one of them. It was over the surf on the beach at night.
How did it move?
How did it move? Uh-oh.
We've got a pretty bad connection.
Yeah.
Are you there?
We really do.
Yeah. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
How did the orbs move? Like, do they just hover, or were they fast, or?
Okay. You're talking about the ones that were over the field of the cattle?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, the four that I saw at first, they would just stay stationary. They just start moving real quick, It's something that if anybody was in it, they would not live, because they're moving hundreds of yards in a split of a second. And they're just going to these almost like formations. And then, like I said, I was only watching for like a minute and a half, and a fifth one came in. And the fifth one came in, I went, whoa. That's when I ran inside to get my phone to try to video it.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's interesting, because there's a lot of theories out there. For those listening, I'm sure you've heard before that people believe in out west in Texas, aliens or something has been visiting. I mean, there's myth about chupacabras, there's lots of different things, but people for years have been speculating that something is visiting these cows. Like I was saying about the mutilations and how mutilation makes me think of the word mess. A lot of these stories lately that I've been reading are cows that have been dissected, and the crime scene, if you want to call it that, has no blood. From what I'm seeing in these pictures, it doesn't look like there's blood either. Did you see, if you can hear me, did you see if there was like blood splatter in the area of the cattle?
Well, there was no blood at all, but there was maybe one explanation for that. I think it rained a little bit that night, but I don't think it was washed all of it.
Right.
But there's no blood.
Yeah, that part's weird.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering about the smell being different, just because I grew up on a farm. I've unfortunately had to bury a lot of animals, and you know the smell of the normal death of an animal. But I'm curious if something strange killed this thing, mutilated this thing, if it had any weird leftover smell. You know, people talk about different beings in the forest leaving smells like a Sasquatch. Not saying that's what's happening here, but sometimes something leaves behind a different odor, you know, and the death that seems unnatural also has an unnatural smell. But you didn't smell anything, I guess.
Yeah, my smell's not the best in the world, especially after COVID. I lost my smell. I only got back about 50% of it, so I don't
Yeah.
smell real well. And of course, there was a lot of smells out there. I was amongst a lot of other cattle, and there's
Right.
stuff on the ground and that sort of thing. But I will say this: there was no signs of any struggle, and we really don't know how the cow died. I mean, it wasn't an unhealthy cow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seemed pretty healthy. It just seemed like it just fell over and died. You know, sometimes that will happen, but when they get older, they get sick, they usually will struggle a little bit, but it wasn't kicking on the ground or anything. It just fell over.
I shared the image that we shared earlier of the cattle with a friend of mine who's a rancher elsewhere, and he's got a lot of theories, but he said something that I've also considered as well. I'm curious what you think. You know, that there's people out there like satanic cults that mess around with animals. Does that do anything for you or ring a bell?
Well, you're saying a cult, you're saying?
Yeah, people have experienced that and they've attributed it. You know, I don't think there's any evidence of that, but people theorize that if it's not extraterrestrial, if it's not an animal, which I don't know how an animal could do this, that there's people out there in the woods doing some ritualistic violence on cows.
Well, they could be, but I don't think it happened in this situation. And we're a very rural area. They
Right.
would have had to come a ways into the ranch. I mean, the dogs would have heard them. I mean, I just can't see anybody doing that.
Yeah, the
People
cut
do weird things.
the cut
man.
is really weird though. It's just how clean it is and how the teeth are exposed. The tongue missing is also pretty weird. You know, when you've seen vultures eat a corpse, they're not so meticulous.
What if it was like an experiment, like like a veterinarian experiment or something? I don't
That
know.
those
I'm
are
just
actually
throwing out
those
ideas.
are other theories out there when you look up cow mutilation stuff, that people are going out there and messing with cows for their own experiments. For sure. Like it's not a cult, it's just someone
Yeah.
out there being like, I want to learn something. But I don't know what you
Have you
get from
But then
that.
why would you just leave it
Have you
there?
showed the Have you showed the full picture yet of the whole cow laying on the ground?
I haven't yet. No, I had to upload it for sharing purposes. It's a little more complicated, unfortunately, than sharing from my email. But we can put them up with the YouTube channel after this goes live, and I'll let people see it. And I wanted to make sure everything was appropriate, because it is gruesome, but I think it's worth people seeing just like how weird it is, because it's not that rare that this has been happening, and the FBI has been investigating stuff like this. And I'm surprised you haven't had the FBI show up yet asking about it. Or maybe you will now. Sorry.
Well, maybe so. Yeah, the cow is in a different field right now, but it's been eating on pretty good by now.
Yeah. And how long did you say you thought the cow was out there dead like that?
Well, I don't know how long it was dead, but I know I checked that field before dark around 5 o'clock, and then I was out there by 8:30 in the morning, so it didn't have much of a window.
Man, that's wild. Well, moving on from the cow mutilations, I know we talked in email and stuff, and you had a few other stories, and we have time for one more if you want to share another story. I think our audience would love to hear them if you have time.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what I want to do here. Shane, I'd like to do that. We don't have this audio so bad it's hard to even focus.
That's fair. That's fair. Look, let's do this then. I really want to have you back because the stories that we talked about are as interesting as this cow stuff. So we'll have you back. We'll have the audio fixed, and we'll go through some more of these stories. So I appreciate you taking the time to share this one with us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me on. Maybe we can get some answers in the chat or maybe answers in the comments. And maybe people have another opinion on what could have happened through these photos if you can post them somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I just have the 3 photos. And, if somebody has some ideas on how this could have happened or a different animal that did it, I'm open for any suggestions, but I have no clue.
We will post the pictures on the YouTube page, and we'll ask the audience to comment, and I'm sure they will on this episode as well. So, all right. Well, sir, thank you so much for your time, and we will talk soon.
Okay. Be blessed.
You too. It's crazy. The cow stuff is crazy.
It's nauseating.
He does have really good stories. I really want to have him on. That connection stunk. So apologies for that.
It's just Discord, and if people have bad connections with their phones, I mean, there's really nothing we can do on our end.
But we'll figure that out because he's got some pretty good ones I want to get through. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas about the cow stuff, I'd love to hear, or just other theories on the cow stuff.
Some people are saying, like, if it's vultures were involved, the eyes would be the first to go.
Yeah.
You can't clean bone like that.
Right.
If it was an animal killing, the parts would have been eaten.
Agreed. Like I said, having grown up on a farm, I've seen vultures operate.
Yeah.
It's not like that.
It looks intentional, whatever is happening.
Yeah. And I've also seen coyotes eat away, It's not like that. I've looked at that photo all week. I'm like, I don't understand. But it does line up with other stories I've had. I mean, yeah. My buddy was saying maybe even MS-13 because of being down south like that, Texas. But who knows, But there have been so many in the recent years that the FBI is investigating them. At some point, I was thinking about going out and just writing about some and checking it out because this has fascinated me for a long time. It's very strange. Whether it's a person doing weird stuff, it's weird. If it's some being visiting, obviously weird. If it's the government doing stuff, who knows? Because it also, when you were talking about experiments, it's like a newer, weirder animal version of the, I think we talked about it recently, about the body snatchers. They call them the resurrection men, resurrectionists who would go out and rob graves to do autopsies because autopsies were outlawed.
But if you're going to do even something like that, why would you leave it there?
Also, yeah, and if that was the case, like, you just get a cow. Why are you doing some random dude's cow? That's why I lean, if it's a person, I lean more towards ritualistic, just weird stuff. Because if it's like kids messing around, I can't imagine kids doing that.
It seems,
unless it's a young Dexter.
A young Dexter.
being taught like, here, come on, young Dexter, we'll bring you out to the cattle field and
I mean, I guess knife. If it's he says he looked it up and it's happening a lot. This was like the first of it.
Oh yeah, and there's weird ones, but I could say, so he said there was rain and it could have got rid of the blood, but there's a lot of other stories where they've found them and there's just no blood.
Yeah.
Anyone say anything else?
The edges of the wound is perfect, not on an animal.
Right.
They always at most call the sheriff, and if he comes out and says the dangest thing I've ever seen.
This is the dangest thing I've ever seen.
Okay, laser cut.
For sure. Yeah, imagine that. Someone out there with a homemade laser.
Ew.
And they're like, we got to test this laser out. Let's go find a cow. Laser is interesting.
Or the orb laser.
Or the orb lasers, yeah. We got to get Ashton Forbes on this.
What? I don't know. It's gross.
Talk about orbs. That's crazy. All right. Well, that was fun.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
We'll have him back. And we got a lot of submissions today for callers. So I'm pretty stoked on that. Thank you to Tim for posting about it. And we're going to have a lot of calls. I'd love to do a caller-only episode sometime.
That'd be great.
Like just have people call in with better connection. So I'm working on that. If you guys want to call in, hit me up at shanecashman@scanner.com, scnr.com. Just shoot me your name, your story. We'll talk about it. We'll get you on the show. We'll have you call in, figure it all out. You can find me at Shane Cashman everywhere online. Please look up Joe and his book. Like I said, all his info is in the description below. Really, really important, interesting stuff that we're going to be talking about a lot more of, especially since those people are very close to our current administration. So yeah, what about you?
Oh, you can find me at I am Alex Ayala on X, and just, like our show, subscribe to our show, and keep watching our show, and call into our show.
Call into our show, share our show. Yeah, we love it.
Yeah.
I've met a few people out in the world.
Yeah.
It's very, very fun and cool that watch it.
You meet people in the world these days?
I don't know if it's the real world, but supposedly I'm outside and it's the sunlight. But yeah, at one point I heard someone listening to us in a car.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Was it me?
No.
Just listening back.
Imagine. Yeah. Yeah. It was the Owen Benjamin episode. It was pretty awesome.
Cool.
But yeah, guys, send me your stories. We'd love to talk to you, and we will see you next week. Later.